We're talking way too early wide receiver depth chart, but also the Minnesota Gophers basketball team has all of the chances to get into the NCAA tournament. And this one game, Michigan State, could hold the key to their fate.
Hey,
You are Locked On Golden
No matter what we're
Gophers,
going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
your daily podcast on the Minnesota
Whatever
Golden
turns out, however it
Gophers.
turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
What up, y'all? We are listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week. And we are jumping in today talking about a way too early depth chart with the Minnesota Golden Gophers wide receiver room. They have a bunch of names in this room, some returners, some transfers, some new freshmen, lots of upside, but how will the room shake out? We're going to get into our pre-spring wide receiver depth charts, what to be on the lookout for in these spring sessions. But then we're going to turn it to men's basketball because men's basketball is on the rise right now. They're thriving. They're starting to hit their stride. The best second half team in the entire Big Ten Conference. But can they get into an NCAA basketball tournament? It's still on the table. And I think this Michigan State game that is coming up tonight could hold all the keys to potentially having a easier chance at getting into that tournament. So we're going to dive into that and why I believe that, and also how this team can make a case for the tourney, all in today's show. So definitely be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any further daily Gophers content. And thank you so much for making us your first listen when it comes to Gophers Daily Sports. Now, tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit about Cam Christie and his rise, but also the more in depth on the women's basketball team and what has been the struggles with Mara Braun's injury and how they can maybe address it. So definitely be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of that content. But let's dive into the Gophers wide receiver room right now. Let's talk about that because first things first, this Gophers wide receiver room has talent. Straight up, they do. And once again, that's back-to-back years with good talent in the room. But can we get them the ball? Can we help them create? That's the biggest question when it comes to this wide receiver room. Now, last season, I said I thought Minnesota would have had a top 2 or 3 wide receiver group in the entire Big Ten Conference. Now, while other Wisconsin fans called me a homer and dumb and all this stuff, when you go back and look at the production, they had one of the most productive receivers in the entire conference, the most consistent receiver in the entire conference in that category, top 3 over the entire season of 2023. But on top of that, they had good production from Corey Crooms, good production from their tight end, and they distributed the ball decent across the entire grouping. All of that being said, with some of the fewest pass attempts in the entire country and some of the fewest passing yards in the entire country. Now, you have those two categories, but you still have a top 3, top 4 receiver in the entire conference. That alone is impressive, especially when you talk about the Gophers had some consistency issues at the quarterback position and whatnot. If they can tick up in that quarterback department, this could be a special room. Now, I will reiterate, the talent is good. So overall, if Minnesota can figure out this quarterback play, they should have all the opportunity in the world to have an offense that can have some balance to it. Now, that being said, they're still going to be run first, plain and simple. Don't trick yourself into not having a more run first team because that is going to happen, especially with Darius Taylor here. But let's talk about that receivers room because yes, they have 2 key departures in Chris Ottman-Bell and in Corey Crooms. Both of those players were expected to take a big role in 2023. Ottman-Bell had some injuries that he was still rehabbing from and didn't get going as much as we'd maybe thought or wanted in that season, but we were just happy to see him healthy. And then you had Corey Crooms, who was probably the second most targeted player on the team, saw the second most receiving production in that wide receiver room. And so definitely they leave a hole in that wide receiver room, but it should only give more opportunities for the younger guys to thrive with more snaps. So Minnesota brings in 2 transfers, Christian Driver coming from Penn State, and then Jalen Varner coming from Emporia State, which is a Division II college school. So you've got those two transfers coming in, plus you've got three starters back in Daniel Jackson, Lemeki Brockington, and Elijah Spencer. Then on top of that, you've got young talent back from last year that didn't see the field, but they were working in the background, working behind the scenes. Kenrick Lanier, Christian Hoskins, TJ McWilliams, Nuke Hayes. That's 4 scholarship receivers right there that are all redshirt sophomores or younger. In fact, only Christian Hoskins is a redshirt sophomore. The rest of them will all be redshirt freshmen in 2024. So lots of young talent still waiting in the wings. Then you got 3 walk-ons in Redding, Konzemius, and Osterman. And then you've got 2 true freshmen in Dallas Sims and Jalen Smith. Now, if you're keeping track of all of that in your head, that's about 14 receivers in this receivers room for the Minnesota Gophers. Now, though I love walk-ons, I love true freshmen, those players I am not really anticipating playing many or any wide receiver snaps at the position in 2024 at this point in time. So that brings us to about 9 receivers that will probably be fighting for only about 6 wide receiver spots tops in this Gophers offense that will play valuable snaps on Saturdays. So the 1s and 2s basically of that wide receiver room will probably see the most work in 2024. So of those 9, who will really crack the depth chart? Who will shape out? Now, if I'm taking my best stab at this in the pre-spring game depth chart and how this room could shake out, the first things first, you look at Daniel Jones, you lock it in, and you say he's your receiver number 1. Plain and simple. Outside guy, he's locked in. Easy money. Then you look at the other outside position. I think you could make a case for Lemeki, but I think he might move into the slot. So I would run with Elijah Spencer, who saw more snaps over the back half of the season, got more involved in the later parts of the season, scored in bowl games, scored in another game. I think Elijah Spencer is going to step up into that other outside role across from Daniel Jackson. So those 2 are my 2 starting outside guys at this point in time. Now, last season, we saw basically 1 slot receiver, and then we saw Tristyn Spann-Ford play in the slot at the tight end as well. So I think uh, with that, Tristyn Spann-Ford is departed. He's going to the NFL. So we saw him outside some last year. We saw him in the slot last year. I think that those roles might not be filled necessarily by a tight end. They might be able to work more receivers into those type of slots and those snaps because it seemed like they were still kind of ticking down for Tristyn Spann-Ford a little bit in this offense as well. So I don't think we're going to see a ton of that from Jamison Gears, if I'm being honest. So to me, that means your third guy on the outside could play a bigger role, and you could maybe have 2 strong slot receivers that get work in a rotation. Now, for me, Lemeki Brockington is my biggest question mark in this wide receivers room. Not from an if he plays standpoint, but because I think he's very likely going to play. But where will he play? We saw a lot of him on the outside last year, but I also could see them working him into the slot in that more slot feature. And on top of that, I think that with that opening being there, he could probably see a ton of snaps from that position. So I would lean into him being that starting slot receiver filling the Crooms role. So then you're looking at your 2s after that. You've got your 3 returners who saw snaps last year as your kind of 3 lead starters. Now, the next 2 on the outside, in my opinion, the first one's Kenrick Lanier. He was running with the 2s all as a true freshman last year. Didn't have to see the field, but the coaches talked him up. What I saw in practices and in spring and in fall, I think he is going to make a case, and I've said that time and time again on this show. I might be one of the biggest advocates for Kenrick Lanier, but I think that kid is going to be special in this Gophers offense. So I think he's going to be the first man up on the outside when it comes to out behind Daniel Jackson or Elijah Spencer. But across from him as the 2s, I think it's going to be a battle this camp, and I think it's going to come down to the transfers. You look at Christian Driver, you look at Jalen Varner. Those are your 2 guys that I think are going to try and compete for that other outside receiver spot of a maybe top 4 wide receiver, top 5 wide receivers on the depth chart overall. So who can battle it out in camp? That is a battle to watch in this spring session. But then you look at the slot wide receiver number 2. Now we could see a second receiver step into the slot if Tristyn Spann-Ford, who isn't here anymore, doesn't cede those snaps to a tight end and they work in more of a receiver. That's where you enter Christian Hoskins, who I am still baffled to this day isn't being worked more in the return game. I feel like he is built for the return game. But regardless, I think they're going to try to find a way to work him into the slot, and he would be a good option to work in that rotation. So I think one player that could maybe push with him is TJ McWilliams, who could push for a chance maybe in that slot role as well as the slot number 2. So at this point now, officially in February, my best guess at a depth chart would be your starters and Daniel Jackson and Elijah Spencer on the outside with Lemeki Brockington in the slot. Then the 2s with a heavy rotation in with the starters would be Lanier and Varner will be my best guess right now with the experience he brings from D2 and having over 1,000 yards, multiple touchdowns for the past few seasons now. I think he'll step into that second outside receiver slot, and then you have Christian Hoskins in the slot position. Those would be my 6 guys if I had to make a guess right now. Now, I think McWilliams, I think Driver, and I think New K's are all going to be fighting, scrapping, clawing, and on the heels of all 6 of these guys to make a case for themselves to be in that rotation for the Minnesota wide receivers. So it'll definitely be a room to watch here in the spring session, but we're going to switch over to some hoops. We're going to talk men's hoops because that is the thing in season right now and playing relatively well. It's time to talk about improvements from the Gophers basketball team that we saw in the Northwestern game most recently, and that they are still hanging around. Is a Tourney shot still in progress? We're going to talk about that coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel because the Super Bowl is officially here. It is this week. It's hard to imagine, but it's flown by, and the football season will officially be over after this Sunday. But with that being said, it's time to celebrate with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you are like me, you know that the Super Bowl is all about getting comfy on the couch with good company, good food, and getting ready to place some super bets. So if you want to dive in and you want to look at all the wild options that they have, from the coin toss, sometimes the Gatorade color, who scores, which players score a touchdown, who scores first, how many points will be scored, and so many different options to choose from with Super Bowl 58, then definitely head on over to FanDuel. And you can go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, and new customers who join today will get $200 in bonus bets if you win your first bet of $5 or more. So you place a bet of $5 or more, and you're getting $200 in bonus bets as long as that $5 bet wins. That's it. Plain and simple. $200 in bonus bets. That's easy money. So definitely give it a shot at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about this men's basketball team because they got a massive win versus Northwestern this past weekend. And we are going to prep a little bit for this Michigan State game because I think it could be a key game in the Gophers' chances of trying to get into the tournament. So first, when we look at that Northwestern game, you're talking about Cameron Christie and Pharrell Payne coming alive in this game. Cam Christie was a huge momentum booster for this Gophers team. Major three-point shots. Got him driving to the rim a little bit. The mid-range jumper is absolutely filthy. When he is on and he is rising to the occasion and he's stepping into his upside, this team is better, plain and simple. When he is playing confident, which he has all the confidence in the world. Since I met this kid in the first presser sessions of this season, before the season actually kicked off, you could just tell he wasn't going to blink an eye. He wasn't going to bat an eye at any competition in the Big Ten. He knew he could compete. He knew he could play. And he's showing that more and more as he gets more and more comfortable. His scoring is continuing to rise as well in these last few games. So you talk about that. You talk about the all-out effort that Payne is giving on the offensive and defensive sides of the floor. Blocks, dunked, you name it. Second chance points. It's all coming from Pharrell Payne. Those two players, paired with Dawson Garcia and Elijah Hawkins, that core of 4 is really helping drive and thrive this Gophers team over the second halves of games. Now, Elijah Hawkins is still the engine that drives it, plain and simple. His facilitating and everything that he brings to the table, his choosing his moments to score. He can hit the 3 ball, and I've had fans ask me, why doesn't he shoot the 3 more? Because he is the best facilitator on this team. This team's offense drives and runs through him. So he kind of has to choose his moments and his spots and his timing as far as when is the best time to really get involved and get aggressive in that scoring department. And I think he's done really well at it. In fact, his 3 at the end of the first half is what really sparked this Gophers team to come in the second half ready to thrive, ready to get back in this game. So overall, Elijah Hawkins is that engine that drives it. And then I think the Gophers, and how they've been getting more comfortable working the ball into Dawson Garcia and letting him create throughout the game has been pertinent for their success. But I think if they get that going a little bit earlier in the games, let him start getting comfortable, quicker shots later into the clock in the early stages of the first half, I think maybe things will start to get started out on a better note, because right now the Gophers are starting slow. In fact, if you look at the differential that they have in first halves in the conference and second halves in the conference, they lead the entire conference in plus minus when it comes to the second half in the entire Big Ten conference. They're the best second half team in the Big Ten by a wide margin, but they're also the worst team in the Big Ten conference in the first half. So you have to find a way to extend some of that quality play into the first half and play a full game. You can't always try to claw back in the second half, because we've seen those clawbacks come up short. You're talking about Nebraska. You're talking about Michigan, or not Nebraska. You're talking about IU. You're talking about Ohio State. You're talking about Michigan State. You're talking about Wisconsin. All of those games in which the Gophers just started off too slow, started to come back, but it was far too late. Now, the Wisconsin game and the Michigan State game were right on the verge. Right on the verge. You do it even just the back 5 minutes of the first half, you probably walk away with wins in both of those games. So this Gophers team needs to find a way to find some success in the first half and still come alive in the second half. Now, the 3-point shooting for this Gophers team is what I find myself questioning every once in a while, because they may have the times where they get really hot from three, and that's how they get back into the games. But I think that they maybe need to start choosing better opportunities earlier in the game, because they often get into cold streaks and slumps in the first half, and that continuously puts them behind the back 8 ball, where then they have to come back and they have to try and claw their way back in the second half. Whereas maybe we take a few less threes in the first and you keep the game more condensed and closer, and then you get those threes and the confidence going that you've had in the second half for what seems like the entire season, and that'll help you really spurn those close games into bigger win games for you and have shots at bigger resume wins, which is what you need to get into the tournament. So I think that is one thing I definitely want to keep an eye on, is the 3-point shooting, especially in the first half. Then on top of that, Cam Christie needs the ball more. He needs the shots more. He needs more shots made for him, creating opportunities for him as a shooter. He needs 10 plus shots a game every game from now on this season, plain and simple, because his upside is huge for this team. And the more he's getting 10 shots, 9 to 10 attempts a game or more, is he's scoring in the double figures. He's finding ways to open up the floor for his other teammates, and the entire team rallies around him. So I think overall, you got to get him 10 plus shots a game, with your 3-point shooting also hopefully being more condensed in the first half, or smarter opportunities in the first half. And then finally, I still want to see Ben Johnson get deeper with his rotation in this team. You look at their game against Northwestern, yes, they found a way to pull it off, but they did not play people outside of their starters very much in that game. I believe one other player outside of their starters had 10 minutes or more in that game. Outside of that, their starters, they had 3 guys with 40 plus minutes and 2 guys right on the verge of 40 minutes. That is far too much to be putting on your players night in and night out. And your schedule is not going to get too much easier. You still got Michigan State, you've got Iowa again, you've got Indiana again, you've got Purdue coming up, Illinois. Those are all going to be challenge games, and you're going to want to play your starters, but at the same time, you have to get life from your bench, and you have the players to do it. Joshua Joseph, Parker Fox, neither one of those players should have had less than 10 minutes in that Northwestern game. Those are players who can spark your bench, spark your team, and maybe pull away sooner than having to go to overtime. On top of that, yes, Parker Fox got into foul trouble in the first half, but that doesn't mean don't play him in the second half. We have to find some consistency, some energy minutes, and a breather for some of your players, so they're not gassed from wire to wire, already fighting through injuries at times. We've got to find a way to get that going. So Ben has to get deeper into his bench rotation, plain and simple. Yes, we pulled off a win, but it's not sustainable to run our guys 35, 40 minutes a game in the starters and not extend the bench. So Parker and Joshua Joseph, even Carrington at that, he's the best defender on the team, especially as a wing and guard defender. Those 3 players need to be worked in more. If you have a rotation of 8, so be it. If you want to go deeper into 9 and have Isaiah Enan, then get after it. But overall, there's no reason this team shouldn't have at least 8 players playing 15 plus minutes a game to help stabilize and sustain the success that you have and not gas out. Maybe you play their key minutes in that first half. and you allow your guys to be ready to go in the second half, or you get different combinations in the first half with some of those key rotating players, and then their second half minutes are early on, and then you let the starters run that back half of the second half and really run things. I don't know, get creative with it, but the depth needs to be extended. Now, as we look to this Michigan State game, which could be a major key for the Gophers in moving forward, which we'll discuss a little bit further in the next segment, but overall, you look at Michigan State, we've already played them on the road in a game we probably should have won without Elijah Hawkins. Well, this time, hopefully you do have Elijah Hawkins. That's one key that you'll definitely want to see, because his facilitating will absolutely help this team have a better offense than what they saw at East Lansing. Now, on top of that, the two things that absolutely caused the Gophers to lose that game versus Michigan State on the road was foul trouble. Cam Christie and Pharrell Payne both in foul trouble throughout the entirety of that game. Cam Christie fouled out in those games. Those are two of your four best players on the entire team. If you are losing them and can't play them and sitting them the entire game, it does not help you. So keeping them out of foul trouble is a high priority. Your top four players, top five players cannot get into foul trouble early in this game. And then on top of that, you have to clean up the turnovers. Minnesota had like 15 plus turnovers in that game and somehow still had it a close game down to the 2-minute mark. It was a 2-point game. You have to find a way to clean up the turnovers. You have to find a way to stay out of foul trouble. You do those two things and you add Elijah Hawkins back. I think Minnesota beats Michigan State at home and has another bump in a net ranking win, which only helps your resume. So that's what we're looking at. I want to talk about what we've learned so far with Ben Johnson's squad and the growth we've seen from it, but how that Michigan State game and a little bit more can get them to the NCAA tournament. We're talking about that today to wrap it up. Lock on Golden Gophers. First, let's talk to you about our friends over at eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what helps keep your ride or die alive. Now, eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, no matter what your thing is, whether it's power, speed, style, anything, they've got you covered over at eBay Motors, where they have over 122 million parts for your ride or die. And that's anything from superchargers to roof racks to exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whatever you need, they've got you covered over at eBay Motors. And the best part of it all is that they have the eBay Guaranteed Fit, which is your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So bring home all the parts you need at the prices you want with eBay Motors and turn your car into the MVP. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and the eBay Guaranteed Fit is for U.S. customers only. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about the growth we are seeing from Ben Johnson and this team over the back half of this season. In this 2023-2024 season, it's been a big one for Coach Ben Johnson to not only win back the fan base, to not only show the growth of this program, but also to make a case that they could do this long term. They could fix this thing long term. Now, this team is tough. This team has been a second half team. Like I said, they have the most positive swings in the entire conference in the second half, but also the worst in the first half. So this team overall is emotional. And that's what Ben Johnson said in the latest press conference after the Northwestern game. Now, he's not talking about emotional as in like they're whining and crying and all of that. No, they get fired up. They play with passion, and they find motivation on the court. Now, at home, a lot of that motivation comes from the fans. They get fired up by the fans, and you can physically see that in the games, plain and simple. The home crowd advantage is huge for this Minnesota Gophers team. And on the road, they still have to find ways to play into it. You can't have guys who are hanging their heads. You can't have guys that are getting a shot in their confidence. And that's where Parker Fox comes into play. That's where Joshua Joseph comes into play, where if you make a big play, a big dunk, a big block, a big rebound, whatever, those are the things that you're puffing your chest out. You're punching the stanchion and you're getting fired up and ready to go on an and one play. You're blocking and you're finger waving and you're going. Like, those are the players that can fire you up on the road and give you that extra motivation. So I think overall, he's right. This team is emotional. But that being said, the home crowd advantage is everything for this Minnesota Gophers team. And if they want to have success moving forward, they need to win their home games. If they want to have a shot at the NCAA tournament, they need to win their home games. Now, you've seen that home court advantage really take place this season. versus Nebraska, where they're down 17 at half and they storm back and they win. And the crowd had a lot to do with that. Versus Maryland, where they were in the fight all the game and they pulled away. Versus Northwestern this past weekend, where again, they were down and they found a way to come back and find a way to win in overtime through it all. The home court advantage has been massive for the Gophers, and they need your help. So they're going to need your help continuously in these next few games because Michigan State, Rutgers, Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana. Those are the final 5 home games, and Minnesota has a chance to win every single one of those. Every single one of those opponents is absolutely attainable, especially at home when this is an emotional team that gets fired up by the crowd. So if you can get out there and you can show love and show support, I think they can pull those 5 games off. You pull 5 games off, you're looking at a 19-win season already with those 5. That's not looking at any of the remaining road games that are still on the schedule. So think about that. If Minnesota only wins their home games to close out the year, they could finish with 19 wins and 10 wins in the conference. That would be huge. It would be right on the verge of a tournament, if not almost an auto tournament. And on that could be everything that Gophers fans are asking about, getting back to the tournament. And a lot of older fans, they continue to bash Ben Johnson, and like, I get it. It's been rough. The first 2 years have been absolutely brutal, but you see the growth of this team right now. And someone even made a sarcastic comment on Twitter talking about, we used to be a team that gets into the tournament every year. When did we start losing sight of that's importance? Nobody lost sight of that importance, but also your view of that is a little bit delusional. The Gophers have only been to the NCAA tournament since it expanded to 64 teams. That happened in 1985. There's been 40 NCAA tournaments since that year, and the Gophers have been to 12. 12. That is not an every year thing. So yes, we need to get there, but that's something that Coach Ben Johnson has talked about, is that this isn't a quick fix, and he understands that, and he knows people don't want to hear that. But if we want to do it, we got to do it the right way. If we want sustained success, if you want to get there every year, then you have to build in, buy in, and get that process going. So I think if you look at the more in-depth things of this team and how it's starting to build and the program is coming alive in year 3, that is positive trajectory. Now, I'm not saying that means you're safe. You still got to go out there and finish the season strong. You still got to go out there and win games. You still got to go out there and make a case that you can at least be on the edge of the NCAA tournament, if not in the NIT tournament. So overall, I think Minnesota has a decent chance. Now, the Big Ten tournament run, if you get 19 wins, you need a little bit of a Big Ten tournament run, maybe 2 to 3 wins in the Big Ten tournament, and that should be enough to get you into the big dance, into the NCAA tournament. And with that, the Big Ten tournament is here in Minneapolis. So another advantageous thing for the Gophers if we can get the home crowd support, home team behind them. So that's looking at 19 wins if you just finish your home games, plain and simple. Now, on top of that, you've got Iowa, Nebraska, Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue. All of those are road games that are still coming up for the Gophers as well. So if you can get an Iowa or a Nebraska or an Illinois or a Northwestern or 2 of those, that is massive for your resume. And that also, if with paired with winning your home games, could put you right in the tournament conversation. Plain and simple. 20-21 wins, I think that gets you in this season. So there's still many opportunities for Minnesota to make a case. But one thing we have said on this show, and you're hearing Ben Johnson say more and more, is that the team needs to play their style of basketball, play their game. Don't get sped up. Don't get hanging your heads. Don't try to run with the other team and play how they play. Play your style of basketball, play into your skill set, play into your emotions, play into your advantages. And this team can hang with the best of them in the Big Ten, plain and simple. We've seen it with Wisconsin. We've seen it with Northwestern. I'm sure we can see it with Illinois and some others as well. But it has to be playing your game, your style, and playing the way that you play. If you can do that, you can pull off upsets. And like I said, if they got into it slightly earlier versus IU or Michigan State or Wisconsin, all of those games could have been reasonable opportunities at wins. So this could be looking at things from a positive mindset, but there's still a lot of possibilities and opportunities on the table for this men's basketball team. Hopefully a Michigan State win, which is a major win at home. Like I said, you got to win every one of those home games, in my opinion. If you can do that, you can make a strong case for yourself, and it all starts tonight at the Barn versus Michigan State. We'll talk a little bit more basketball all week and a little bit of football as well, women's basketball tomorrow. I'll see you there. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any Gophers content moving forward, and hit like so others can find the video. I will see you tomorrow. Roll the boat, Jase Medical Gophers, as always, and don't forget to subscribe.